the big, beautiful bill, which doesn't technically have that name anymore, at least the Senate version that got voted out, 50-50, needed a tie-breaking vote from VP Vance. 3 Republicans voted against the deal. Tom Tillis, we already knew was going to do it. Rand Paul, we already knew was going to do it. The question was, they could only lose one other vote or the whole thing would have gone down. And there were sort of 3 nominees sitting there, or 4, if you believe Ron Johnson, although I think a lot of people have come to learn that Ron Johnson is all talk. He never follows through on any threat. He just doesn't do it. Whenever he wants to push back at Republican orthodoxy, Donald Trump, somebody must remind him, he always folds. Rand Paul doesn't always fold. Ron Johnson always folds. So who was it? Well, it was Susan Collins. So for those of you wondering, is she running for re-election? Is she not? Who knows? But you certainly, if you're her, probably would want to be able to say you voted against this bill if you're running for re-election. So clearly she is keeping that option open. She is up in 26 from Maine. But Lisa Murkowski voted for it, and Josh Hawley, another person who was on the fence, voted for it. And what's interesting there is how they sort of explain their votes for it, because they hate the bill. They both have still criticized the bill. In fact, let me read you Josh Hawley's statement. Now, Hawley begins his statement praising an amendment that he did get passed. It was a bipartisan amendment that helps the victims of radiation exposure, particularly in the St. Louis region in his state. So he leads with that. He says RECA, that's the acronym for this radiation exposure fund, is generational legislation for Missouri and will finally deliver justice for survivors in the St. Louis region. And when this reconciliation bill is signed into law, Missouri will also see new health care funding and big tax cuts for working families. Then he adds this: I call on the House to quickly pass this legislation and send it to President Trump's desk. And now the but. But let me be clear, I will continue to do everything in my power to reverse future cuts to Medicaid. If Republicans want to be the party of the working class, we cannot cut health insurance for working people. So what did he just say they did? Essentially, Josh Hawley's statement explaining his vote for it also says we cannot cut health insurance for working people, which means he is admitting they just cut health insurance for working people. So they got to own that. Now, what's funny is just a few days ago, Josh Hawley said this: this has been an unhappy episode here in Congress, this effort to cut Medicaid. And I think, frankly, my party needs to do some soul searching. If you want to be a working class party, you've got to deliver for working class people. You cannot take away health care from working people. Unless this is changed going forward, that is what will happen in coming years. So I'm going to do everything I can to stop that. Well, no, he didn't, because he could have voted for it, which would have forced an entire it would have forced essentially everything to go back to the drawing board. Now, let me take you to Lisa Murkowski. Lisa Murkowski also decided to vote for this. Now, here's what Lisa Murkowski explained why she voted for it. Number one, she said, look, if you kill it and it's gone, there is a tax impact coming forward. That's going to hurt people in my state. So because of the tax provisions, and just to remember in this big, beautiful bill, it's the extension of those Trump tax cuts from 2018. Now, ironically, the way it had been set up at the time, Donald Trump was hoping never to have to be responsible for deciding whether his tax cuts would get extended or not. They were due to expire, in theory, at the end of his second term. But he didn't win re-election in 2020. He lost, which meant they expired in the first year of his new second term. Right? He was hoping another president would have to deal with this. Another Republican Party would have to deal with this. But nope, his party had to do it. So, of course, he has to extend it, because if he doesn't extend it, because of these ridiculous reconciliation proposals where everything is, they pretend they somehow have made something impact the deficit less than it has, right? They create an expiration date for the tax cut. So they create this fantasy expiration date of 8 years down the road when they passed it the first time, in order to let somebody else decide, oh, do you want to allow the tax cuts to expire, and therefore essentially raising taxes on everybody? So that's what she's referring to there. But then she adds this to reporters. Murkowski said, my hope is that the House is going to look at this and recognize that we're not there yet. So Josh Hawley wants the House to immediately pass this bill, send it to the president's desk by the July 4th deadline. Lisa Murkowski is saying, oh, please, House Republicans, don't vote for this. Send it back to the Senate. She has this, I guess, quaint notion that she somehow wants Congress to work the way it did in the 20th century when, you know, how does, if you actually watch Schoolhouse Rock, kind of how a bill became a law, at least some ping-ponging back between the House and the Senate. But of course, Donald Trump doesn't want that. So let me tell you, whether, and you're seeing a lot of people on the left are jumping on Lisa Murkowski, banging her on this. Like, look, she has always been Alaska first. She's not America first. She is Alaska first. And if she can get a deal, a special carve-out deal for Alaska, she'll do it. She'll take it, and she becomes a vote for it. And she's done it for Democratic legislation in the past. She's done it for Republican legislation. On that, she's consistent. She's very transactional about this when it comes representing Alaska. And arguably, it's how she got elected, right? In order, because she didn't win a Republican primary, she lost a Republican primary. So she wasn't beholden to Republican voters, but she was beholden to the deal she cut in her mind. And that's why if she thinks she can get something that's better for Alaska, she's going to take that deal. So she's going to take the deal. But she was hoping the House kills it, right? This is one of those. Maybe Josh Hawley secretly wants that too. Maybe Ron Johnson secretly wants that. We know Rand Paul does. But guess what's not going to happen? The House is not going to vote this down. For all the, like, as if the Freedom Caucus, as if you want to talk about the Crying Wolf Caucus, the Freedom Caucus ought to change their name to the Crying Wolf. How many times I'll see my friends at Punch Bowl say, oh, the Freedom Caucus has problems with something. Yeah, and they'll do nothing about it, and they'll all fall in line, except for the one or two that don't have to, because they'll have just enough margin to be able to claim, well, I didn't vote for it, but it still passed, vote no, hope yes type of mindset. And remember, the chief whip of the House Republicans is not the Speaker of the House. It is not the actual whip. It is not the majority leader. It is Donald Trump. So, the whole point of that exercise last week of attacking Thomas Massie and literally lining up a primary challenger and getting consultants to show up and all, you know what all that was? It was a demonstration to anybody else who chooses to cross Donald Trump, right? It's a threat. Why did Josh Hawley not vote? Why didn't he vote against this? He knows he is voting against the interests of his constituents. So why did he vote against it? Because here's the dirty little secret. His constituents would have punished him for not supporting Donald Trump. It would have been seen not as somebody standing up on principle trying to defend Medicaid access for all of his constituents. He'd been seen by those same people who don't want to see those Medicaid cuts, mind you. You can't betray Donald Trump. That's a betrayal of Donald Trump. And it's a very powerful tool that Donald Trump currently has in the toolbox. Eventually, the tool won't work, but it still works. And it's going to get this House bill through.